And we are recording. Right, I will hand it over to you, Jeremy and Chris.
All right, thank you. And I believe Chris is on mute here.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I've got a double muting thing because I'm coming in on my phone audio-wise.
Yeah, as Chris says, if you could please call in, we would appreciate.
Already done.
You guys.
It's already done. You can hear me fine,
Probably,
right?
Other members are having the same issue. If you could please call in.
Can you not hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I don't understand. I have called in. I'm already connected.
Okay, so it seems like everybody can hear you fine, Chris. Go ahead.
I will carry on. So I'm going to grab the screen and go for it. And go here and get rid of you. Let's go into. Okay. Let's just look. We'll just see Jeremy's face while I'm talking. Okay. So thank you, everybody. This is a where we're going to talk about value management. What does value management mean? What does benefits realization mean? How can we enable it through some good technology? So a quick introduction myself, and then I'll throw to Jeremy. I am calling in from the province of Ontario, so just sort of north of you. And in fact, I'm on Lake Huron today at an alternate location. I'm actually not in Toronto today. I am a PMP. I have a proud PMP holder over many years. So it's nice to connect with another chapter. Of course, I'm part of the Toronto chapter of PMI. That's my home base. But I also connect quite often with PMI UK, which is kind of fun. As you can see, I've worked for many larger firms. I'm now on my own, running my own independent practice, working with great colleagues such as Jeremy on enablers such as Amplify. Jeremy?
Thanks, Chris. So Jeremy Whitmer. My role is I lead North America for Amplify, which is a provider of what we call strategy execution management software. And we'll get a little bit more into what that means later in the introduction here. Joining you from my basement here in Bay Village this fine morning. And so happy to be, first of all, kind of introducing myself and our solution to the PMI team. I know I had the opportunity to meet a few of you at the golf outing a couple of weeks ago. But with that, I guess I'll hand it off to Chris, who's going to go through value management.
Okay. So I'm going to just hide you there. So value management is coming from this from a transformation perspective. Some of you, many of you may be more familiar with thinking through the basic value proposition of organizations or value drivers that organizations can sort of rally around. This perspective today is about when we're spending money in transformation, how do we deliver and sustain the value from that investment, in transformation. And so my experience from many years in this topic, which started in consulting back in the late 1990s when I first got introduced to benefits realization and these topics, that I find that a lot of companies and people talk about it and many claim that they do it, but it turns out that I think there's actually very few organizations do it or do it well or do it consistently. The issue here to me is around the disconnect between the work that's done on transformation or implementing new systems or so forth is actually the project team goes away, and it's a bit like build it and they will come, put in the new system, team goes away, and all the benefits that were imagined when in the original business case aren't actually managed to their proper conclusion. So some people might call value management other names, benefits realization, it might be called outcomes management. There's lots of different names, and certainly in the PMI literature, it's more benefits realization. So But here's what I call critical success factors that are like tenants, like that they are just really important sort of baseline items. And the first is to understand that benefits don't just get realized because magic happens, right? Which is what most business cases are, right? If we do this, we're going to get these great benefits. But it turns out that there's some work involved. And so it's a consequence. Benefits get realized as a consequence of a logical, hopefully logical sequence of actions and their outcomes. And that the outcomes are independent of how we figure out how those outcomes are actually happening and being achieved. So measures or KPIs or something, or metrics, those are independent of the outcomes. They're obviously linked, but they're not the outcome itself. Some outcomes sound a lot like a measure. Decreased costs. That's a pretty good one. But, there's clearly that we know what the measure is in there, but there might be many elements of decreasing cost, and so therefore we might have other things. And some things are hard to measure, so therefore you need to come up with proxies. And from a transformation perspective, the reason you do measurement is so that you can see how you're doing based on what you thought you were going to achieve in the first place. Right? So that's the reason you want to then use them, last point, you want to use them to make better decisions, first about making the investment in the first place and for tracking the achievement of that. And if you're not getting what you thought in terms of business outcomes, then you need to start changing. You need to make some adjustments. You need to think through, are we doing enough of the right things? Are we doing enough change management activities? And so on. We'll get more into that as we go on. So my view is, if organizations applied a fraction of the effort that we spend on managing costs, which as project managers, that's what we do, the iron triangle, we manage costs, we manage scope, we manage risks, great. But we also need to manage value, at least in terms of our time when we're helping out organizations make the change. And I think many more transformation initiatives would actually be rated successfully. I'm not bringing out the usual sort of slide that says about how many transformation and vision initiatives fail. That's not the point in my view. So what is value management? These are the kind of outcomes you should expect by implementing a value management sort of construct or approach, and modifying what an organization actually does in terms of its sort of governance and gateways. These are the sort of expected benefits. It's about linkages, especially around strategic outcomes and business outcomes. As I said, it's talked a bit about governance. So value management, those might be the results, but what is it? It's a discipline. It's an approach, a formal disciplined approach to defining, managing, and more confidently capture the value imagined from business transformation investments. And those could be transformation through continuous improvement efforts. Those could be multiple continuous improvement, which ultimately in the aggregate you could call transformation. They could just be day-to-day operational kind of improvements, or they could be more transformation, right? So as we said, as I said a few minutes ago, that I think many efforts don't deliver the full benefits, and had they spent more time thinking through and being more formalized about managing value and governing that way, then I think we'd actually have a lot better results. And I think it is even PMI now, it includes it in some of the standards, as do other sort of related things like Axelos is managing successful programs, and Prince 2 and so forth. So it's becoming a primary focus, but we still have a ways to go. Okay, well, if those are the critical success factors, then we've got 4 critical concepts, which this forms the bulk of my presentation today, which then Jeremy will have the opportunity to show how this happens in action. So first is, I've been using the word logical very deliberately, because I think we need to get a lot better at being logical about our business cases. Second, I'd like to reframe the business case into something called a value case. So then we're going to talk about how do you enhance or change transformation program governance using these concepts. And then lastly, how do you enable this? And because it's all about visibility of results to me, and in my experience, and I think the literature is starting to show a lot more connection here about accountability. Okay, so let's go through each of those briefly in a little bit more detail. So what's a value logic model? Some people could call this an outcomes map, a benefits realization map, even a form of a strategy map, though I think strategy map tends to be more turned on its head. It goes from the top to the bottom. We're going to go from the left to right in this one. So conceptually, what we're trying to do is understand how transformation or change initiatives impact the status quo or the business as usual state of the business. You could very simply, this is a very simple model of how an organization has objectives, and maybe it has operational goals. And I'm using some people think the exact opposite. You should have strategic goals and operational objectives. That doesn't matter as long as you're clear with your audience, all of which can be measured. And then an organization, especially a service-oriented organization, this is not a product one, in this case, has services and processes that support those services. Services as outcomes with respect to its customers, processes are outputs that help deliver services. You can call those organizational capabilities if you want to sort of generalize it. Now I'm pulling up business architecture speak a little bit, so hopefully those understand what I'm saying. But if that's what the organization does in a very simplistic way, then what transformation does is applies changes to those, and that's what I mean by this middle bubble here around changes. Those are the business changes that changes processes, changes the nature of the services and so forth. And those are good. And how you get those changes is by going through some sort of form of change initiative. And I've documented using this sort of a 3 PM view of the world here, or PPP. And what do you get out of doing that work? You get capabilities, right? So there are outputs. These are tangible things. But what I think gets lost in business cases, aka value cases, is the idea that how does the business change? How does the business leverage these new capabilities to do something different, which then has benefits in and of itself? So a typical business case would just focus on these benefits. The other thing that I'm really focusing on here is making sure that those benefits are in fact aligned to the larger strategic objectives and operational goals of an organization. And note that all of these can be measured. Right? This is what I meant by KPIs or measures. And so these important outcomes would be reflected through important measures, some might call them KPIs, that you would include on a scorecard somewhere. And I'm not saying what type of scorecard, because that's a whole other conversation. So here's a tangible example of a value logic model. And you can construct these in PowerPoint. You can construct them in Visio. You can construct them in fact, the software that Jeremy's going to show you today. So here's an example of what I call sort of a multi-threaded transformational effort. The first thread or row here comes for those, you don't need to know much about procure to pay, but know this, that if you in fact do new contracting using strategic sourcing, and maybe you're introducing new ways of managing vendors, these would be the types of business results and benefits that you could expect. It's about having new contracts. It's about hopefully starting to see the business actually using those contracts. So this is you could disagree or agree with the logic, but if you do these things, these would be the kind of results that you would see, ultimately leading to hopefully decreasing operating expenses. Those are good things to do in and of themselves. But what if we added some technology to this? Maybe we added a spend analytics capability. Maybe we add in a new e-procurement workflow. Coupa is the system of choice these days. So now you have processes enabled by technologies, and you're starting to direct use of these contracts that you're creating here. So unsurprisingly, there's a link here, which I'll show in a second, and having visibility of spend, well, that might be helpful in actually creating the contracts in the first place. So unsurprisingly, there's actually some links there, which shows you this is, transformation isn't just the pulling of one lever and hoping something changes. It's actually the pulling of multiple levers and see how they interact to be able to get to these benefits. So again, each of these threads have benefits in and of themselves, but when they interact and are integrated, you actually get transformational results. So that's a specific example, and Jeremy will show you something about that shortly, a real live example. And I've actually got some other examples as we get a little closer to the end of my time. So I think of value logic models as having multiple sort of tiers or levels. You could have them at kind of the industry level or reference or even a template, if you will, that this is something that my time at KPMG they've done, where they've thought through corporate function transformation like HR, that if if you use these types of enablers, these are the kind of the results that you would expect, and they do benchmark this. And I know PwC and others do the similar things. So do we have a template or an archetype that we could use to be able to actually drive out at increasing levels of detail? So that's interesting. So then if we can think of how do we apply it in context at a more of a strategic level, which keeps the conversation at a sort of strategic level, to reuse that word. So we're trying to think bigger picture here. But now when we start to think through, okay, well, what does that mean? So maybe we could have actually a transformation program, and maybe I've duplicated. I would think this is more the program level, especially around outcomes. And then now we can actually drill down into actual projects, right? And this typically is where the business case happens. We don't tend to have business cases up. This is more the portfolio view. This could be thought of as the program view, and this could be thought of as the project view. Okay, so just different levels of analysis. And I've got some specific examples of that shortly. So value cases. Well, I'm trying to make the case here, if I don't excuse me using the word, that we need to evolve our maturity with respect to business cases. That typically business cases are one-off events, and I'm trying to think of and get people to think that they're not. That in fact a business case that lives through the life cycle of a program, let's call it a value case, because it actually includes the achievement of the benefits that we were imagining in the business case in the first place. So value case iteration 1, deliverable, could be called business case, and I'm good with that. But over the life cycle, and in fact, what I think is more of a value case. So what we want in a value case is perhaps something quantitative, absolutely, which can be scorecarded and reported on, just like in this screenshot, but also has a portfolio kind of aspect to it, where we're understanding its alignment, its risk profile. Oops, that's supposed to be remaining cost, not cash. Isn't it amazing how you look at something for how long and there's a typo right there? Anyways, so the other thing we want to make sure that value cases become living documents rather than just dying on a shelf. And this to me is a failure of governance, or maybe I'll turn it into a more positive spin, an opportunity for organizations making smart choices about what they're spending their money on when it comes to transformation. Which leads me to my next topic around governance, which is all about decision making. So how do we add this idea around value, not just scope, time, money, and risk? How do we add value to this conversation? Well, one way of doing that is to think through where does it sit. So value is about strategic alignment. Projects are about getting it done, so more tactical. The concept of a value gateway, either on its own or somehow integrated into current governance structures, which is probably a more typical way of embedding this. But generally, a lot of the governance structures are too low a level. There needs to be need to elevate that conversation a bit, and so gateways might be a way of doing that. So when would we do that in the life cycle of a project? Well, if we think about maybe a 6 sort of journey through transformation, where we define the strategy, we do a couple of different levels of design, we actually build out and configure. And this doesn't necessarily mean technologies. Technologies could absolutely be part of it. You could just be building a new organization and so forth. And then you're actually deploying capabilities, and then you move into more of a continuous improvement cycle. How you might want to add and the types of questions around values at the different times in this journey. Do we have a good value case at the beginning? Does it justify the investment once we've done the high level sort of design? And as we continue to iterate the value case, is it detailed enough to be able to sort of authorize? So this is kind of a bit of an agile approach, right? We don't know all the costs here, but we have a sense of the magnitude. As we move into the detail, we're getting into a much more detailed kind of costing. And as we go through build and configure, have we actually come up with those metrics and KPIs, and are we tracking them, and are we getting the value? Of course, these 3 questions can apply at any part of the stage, but I've just documented and placed them here just so it's easy to read. Hopefully this makes sense to you. And now we're to the last concept, which is about value visibility. So everybody's comfortable with Excel. Everybody loves Excel, and consultants especially love Excel. But we turn to it because it's easy to use. but it's not so aligned to fit the purpose when it comes to portfolio or value type situations. They're time consuming. There's a lack of consistency. Gathering data and consolidating is just a tough task. It's also not multi-user, right? I should add another bullet. So can we use an integrated sort of cohesive technology? And there's a lot of players out there now that allow this sort of thing, of which we're going to show you a very specific example of in Amplify. This is all about executing transformation or executing strategy, which is all about perhaps about having logic models, actually having those embedded in the platform, or being able to import those kind of models. That we need to have this value case live over time, that we can link them to measures, financial and non-financial. And ultimately, we do need to produce, whether they're balanced scorecards or just scorecards, for where are we going, are we seeing the results? And so that's what Amplify is a very good example of a strategy execution management platform. And there are others, but I think this is a best of breed. So just before I give it over to Jeremy, let me walk you through a specific example from my experience, which happened about 5 or 6 years ago when I was still with KPMG, and I worked with the Canadian Department of National Defense, which is of course a tiny thing compared to the DoD, but let's just Canada, we're there. So I had the opportunity to work with our defense forces in something called the Defense Renewal program, and they published a massive document which listed out 34 different initiatives, and they collected that they were all defined bottom up, and then they put them in this sort of this umbrella transformation program that they took as a single sort of strategic undertaking. And managing those initiatives was tough. So what they wanted to understand is they wanted to manage by outcome, not by output. And so they wanted to apply a value management approach. The actual engagement, by the way, for just the value management components of this, of looking at the 34 initiatives, overall the consulting fees were well over $20 million Canadian, which I know is not much in US dollars, but take that as you will. It was $3 million just on that. So that's interesting. So you'll see here, what I'm going to try to do is build up what would a strategic sort of level logic model look like. What do you mean participants can now see your screen? I would hope they've been seeing it all the time. So here's the initiatives over on the left, right? Just there's a bucket of 34 initiatives. Over on the right is through that charter document, if I boiled it down, which I did, their two key objectives was resourcing reinvestment. They want to make sure that resources were being reinvested in capabilities and readiness. And they want to make sure that they're always ready to be able to produce and deliver military capabilities. That's what defense sitting there is always sitting there waiting to be called on. So that's what they do. So that's their end objectives. And what that first objective is different, right? That's unique to public sector in my experience. So they actually wanted to take savings from one area and apply it back to other areas in the organization. And anybody who's worked in the public sector knows that's a tough ask. Right? Okay, so how did we get there? Well, we did this by managing that roadmap, managing by value, and amending it as needed over time, as well as the ultimate, what they were trying to produce is this lean and efficient organization that continuously finds ways to conduct the defense business smarter, the business of defense. And how did they make that happen? They did that by having these, what they called effects. They forced me to change my language instead of results. These are effects, same words. They wanted to have making better decisions. They wanted to have a stronger culture of innovation, which if anybody who's worked in the military knows that sometimes that runs across purposes to, this is how we do things. This is how we've always done things. Yes, sir. Right. So we know that there's a creative tension here. I'll put a positive term on it. They want to use technology smarter and to have it enable process improvements. They're basically rethinking the business of defense. Okay, so that's the high level objectives view. This is an outcomes model, right? So how do we drill that down? So here's that same model with a slightly different spin on it. First off, I just slightly rearranged because you won't be surprised to learn that I'm filling in some gaps here. The things that I filled in are some other capabilities that they were looking for, which is something called strategic clarity, something called increased discipline of business execution, and something called openness and trust, which again, for anybody who's worked in the military knows that, that's a creative tension point too. But this shows how this all kind of folds together. And then here's all the different initiatives, right? So when they published the charter document, they created 6 groups, themes of initiatives, and grouped all of the initiatives in those buckets. This provided a unique, differentiated view about, rather than thinking about the themes, what they're working on, they're thinking in terms of the outcomes that these initiatives are actually helping to produce. That was a turning point for the organizational leadership in defense. They'd never thought of it this way before, and it led to some big changes. The other thing I'm going to talk to you about is this top row here, which is kind of like a governance thing, right? So by employing, not only was there all of these initiatives going on, they needed to transform how they actually managed the program, so through metrics and performance measurement. And this performance management framework, or measurement framework, the PMF, was used to make better decisions so they could actually have reinvestment opportunities understood, approved, which then led to reinvestment of pieces. So now if we've gone from the higher level, now we're drilling down into one of those initiatives, which was about, unsurprisingly, procurement. So I'm not going to walk you through this model, but you can see that over on the right, we've got objectives. In the middle, we've got benefits. And we've got capabilities or outputs, and then the results of those capabilities, which we would call effects. We will be sharing this afterwards, by the way. So, nice color coding, a few icons. But why I'm showing this is, what do you do with this? What are the KPIs? So use this as your ability to figure out what are the KPIs, what are the metrics. So you want to select a group of metrics across a range of outcomes, and people who are paying attention will notice very quickly this one in the middle, a lot of roads lead into it and a lot of things come out of it. That would be an important one to measure. So can you measure increased use of more effective and efficient procurement instruments? This is the setting up that strategic sourcing or new procurement instruments. How do you measure that outcome? Well, my client chose to do percentage of a procurement against the managed instruments. So they started tracking how they're being used. That's a good start. I think they could go further. And here's some other ones that they were suggesting. Drilling down further into a particular measure, each of these measures are going to have a life cycle themselves, and there needs to be some corporate investment in actually doing measurement. So this just drills down into how it is. Some measures are leading, some measures are lagging. Actually, there's no such thing as a leading indicator, in my opinion. They're just a little less lagging, but that's okay. They could be, feeding forward. Okay, so now I'm going to pass now. Hopefully, I've left you enough time, Jeremy. I think I'm right on time. I'm at half hour. And I'll switch to your screen. I'll stop sharing.
All right, great. Thanks, Chris. And I think actually we can take a moment to pause here. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, sure.
For Chris, after that demo there, or after that presentation?
Thank you, Jeremy.
The roadmap seems to be a key early piece in the project. How long does this typically take in terms of all the stakeholders and getting almost the wrestling match to get it to work?
So partially, so with the Defense Renewal Program, it took us 6 months across the 34 initiatives to document each of those initiatives to a sufficient level with the stakeholders that are involved in each of the initiatives, and get agreement on, one, what does the outcomes model look like, first 3 months, and then the second 3 months was getting onto the metrics and agreeing on how they're going to be scorecarded. So that's what that took, that the majority of the effort took that time. But can I just also reframe your use of the word roadmap? I like the use of the word roadmap when it comes to outcomes, because this is a journey to produce these outcomes. But a roadmap, us all being project managers, know that that's kind of a high level view of an implementation plan. This is an outcomes oriented, so there isn't a time dimension shown. We don't have the cascading Gantt chart here. This goes hand in hand with that kind of document, that now we've got a priority setting about what are the initiatives. Each of those initiatives are going to have a Gantt chart too, sitting on a roadmap. But this is an outcomes view of the roadmap. Does that answer your question?
as soon as I get off of unmute, yes, but knowing that it took 6 months to get the different buckets in place, that's impressive. And patience.
Well, but also you wouldn't believe how quick that was in the scale. This was $1 billion savings they wanted to get run rate every year. Now I know $1 billion Canadian isn't the same as $1 billion US, but it was a significant. They had never ever, worked this way and at that speed. I mean, they're used to working at speed on the things they know how to do, but this kind of effort was very, very different for them. So that was actually a very quick time frame. Look, if you're going to spend $100 million to do something, taking 6 months to make sure you're doing it right, because all of these initiatives had their own business case, and they were trying to be put into this overarching structure. These were bottom-up initiatives. They were trying to force fit from a top-down perspective, and this provided the glue to do that.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Chris? All right, well then with that, I think I'll start sharing my screen. And so let me just pop open my browser here. So first of all, thanks everyone for hopping on. Again, to introduce myself, Jeremy Whitmer, lead North America for Amplify-Now, which is a company that makes what we call strategy execution management software. And so if you want to know what is strategy execution management software, it's basically the software that enables the process that Chris just kind of walked through. So we always talk about managing business outcomes rather than project output. And so what that means is taking these value cases, looking at these overarching business goals, and enabling organizations to actually execute against those goals rather than focusing on the iron triangle of, on time, on budget, within scope here. And so what I want to do today is just kind of highlight how, Chris's PowerPoint would be represented in a software tool such as Amplify. The one thing I will say is I'm going to be showing a bit different mapping technique than what Chris was highlighting there. Actually, the best demo I have, which has the benefits mapping in our tool, is based on Hoshin Conry, but I can show you another example that we have here as well. And so first things first, it is a web-enabled tool, as you can see here. So what I've done is I've logged into the solution, and what I'm presented with here is my personal dashboard that just tells me here are all the things that I need to worry about here. So we try to make it so that for an end user, it's pretty straightforward. Here are the things on your mind. And if I just want to pop in, make some updates, get back out, I can do that all right here just through my personal dashboard and kind of get on with my day here. But in this example, what I would like to do is kind of focus on what Chris was showing here. And so what we've got here is our enterprise. In this case, we're looking at Dunder Mifflin and a variety of different programs that we're running within this enterprise here. And so today specifically, we're going to take a look at this program we call our strategy deployment process. So if I click on this, what I'm presented with are just kind of my overall financials for the program. I also have some different dashboards that I can use at the program level. So if I want to take a look at, our Power BI dashboards here, so kind of what we use for our executive reporting, can just flip over to that. And here's where I get a good view of, within this program, using a kind of small example here, have bigger ones, but just this case showing some of the project statuses within this program. What are the overall benefits that we're looking to achieve here? So we're looking at financial benefits. What are our costs associated with executing the program? And then how's our schedule looking? And then what we could do is drill down on some of the different projects that are in this program. And so I can just cycle through them here. We can take a look at our benefit details. So how are we tracking? How does that look over time? Costs, schedule, et cetera. So just a variety of ways in which we can kind of look at our overall program performance. This is all through Power BI. So the layout of the reports that you see here is of course very flexible and can be shared with your executive stakeholders here. But what I want to do is kind of just jump into what Chris was demonstrating here. So what we have in Amplify is our map. And so we'll show the map here at a high level. And at a high level, it's not very interesting. We've got our strategic breakthrough objective, we've called it here, for the overall program, which is $20 million. And we've got two work streams that we're looking at here. So we have an HR work stream and a finance work stream, which we're using to deliver towards that target. And so what we'll do is we'll take a look at our HR work stream. So we can drill down on that one. And what we've got is a bit more interesting map that we've built out here at the HR work stream. And so in this case, again, it's kind of aligned to Hoshin Connery. Those of you who are familiar with Hoshin Connery kind of know the X matrix that goes from your 5-year strategic breakthrough objectives to your 1-year annual objectives. You then identify your improvement and priorities, and then finally you're identifying your KPIs or your targets to improve here. And so what we can do is just kind of cycle through these and see that, well, we've got this strategic breakthrough priority of looking at $20 million of savings in the program. What we've done is we've decomposed these into shorter term objectives that we're targeting for the next year. So in this case, we've got 2.5 million in year 1 savings from HR. We have our improvement priorities, which are basically our projects that we're going to be looking to execute. So here we have 1, onboard new individuals, and then we've got our targets to improve. And if I wanted to see kind of my contribution map, so how do these actually align here, I can go up here, highlight contributions, and I see kind of the straight line. These two targets to improve are 100% contributions. This one, we kind of allocate where we say 20% of his contribution goes towards this initiative, 80% goes towards another. So we're not really double counting here. So this kind of shows how we work on this through Amplify here. And what we can do is begin to drill down on some of these. So like, let's see how we're doing against our strategic breakthrough objective here. So what we can do is just open the dashboard. And what I'm looking at, first of all, is my target against that. So we have our first year target of, or FY21, 2 million. And then we have the 5 million, which is kind of what we're targeting for this fiscal. And we go on up here. What we can next look at is how is our value case trending against that? In this case, it's our plan. And so here we can see our plan with the purple bars, and we can see that we're overshooting that initially, but in FY26, we're actually still falling a little bit short there. So we still need about $560,000 worth of additional improvements to achieve our objective there. We can also take a look at our forecast, which is where we're currently projected to land. And so in this case, our forecast is right on plan. And then we can take a look at our actuals. And so what are the actual benefits that we've logged towards this plan here? And if I scroll down a little bit and open these up, I can see how my individual work streams and different initiatives are all rolling up to that. So now if we kind of go back a little bit, I'm actually going to move that. So if we go back and take a look at our dashboard, what we can then do is kind of follow the path down. The annual objectives look more or less the same as what we just saw, but we can take a look at our improvement priorities here. So the improvement priorities, these are the initiatives or projects that you're executing in order to realize those gains. And so here we can see what are the benefits that are aligned to this. So we're planning 6.19 million in benefits. We're forecasted to achieve 6.19 million. And then we've logged 320,000 in actuals. We also have the costs associated with executing this project. Any risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies that we've raised here. And then finally, we can see a high-level Gantt chart just to see how we're doing in terms of executing our tasks here. So we can see we've actually completed our project planning here, and we're here in our execution phase. This is a pretty simplistic view, I think, of the program here. What we can also take a look at, so earlier Chris was demonstrating kind of the concept of a stage gate process and the different milestones associated with that. So we also have that concept here in Amplify. And so if I go in here, we can kind of see our stage gate process that we'd be doing with this initiative. So we start off with identify, we have define, implement, etc. And for each of these initiatives, what we can do is define approvers, so role-based approvers, and add any commentary associated with that. And so this really kind of provides a nice rigorous structure for us to understand what is the maturity of these initiatives, so that not only are we looking at, say, the financial and the cost performance of the program, but then just, which stage is it in, which milestones have we hit along with that here. And then if we follow the cascade down here, and I go into one of our initiatives, so we'll take a look at the, we'll take a look at this one here. We can see how we're doing with regards to our target to improve here. So with regards to our KPI for the cost reduction program. So here we see that we are planning to save 5.76 million. Our current forecast is right on top of that. And we see how that rolls out over time here. What I can see here is that I'm a bit behind actually in logging my actuals. And so what I can do is go to the plan really quickly, just add my value and go ahead and save that. So now we've got another data point that we've captured here. And so ultimately that's how it works out here with this, again, example where we've kind of got the Hoshin-Conry matrix that we're following with regards to the mapping. Additionally, we do have ones that are a bit similar to what, a bit more similar to what Chris was showing there, where we can do the initiative and then align that to a business change. And again, we can do that highlighting and see how it all flows through. So we have an initiative activity-based management portal. We're expecting 2 business changes to come from that. So we're going to enhance our health system connectivity. We'll enable the training staff to use new technology and equipment. That drives the business outcomes that you see here. Finally, the benefits and our goals. And if we want to take a look at how we're performing relative to our goal there, we can kind of see our plan, our baseline plans and actuals all lined up here. So it's meant to be, again, a comprehensive solution that really helps see how we go from interlocking or really kind of helping join the management of a traditional program, again, looking at the budget, the schedule, and your scope, but then also emphasizing the achievement of business outcomes, business goals. So not only being able to map that so that we have alignment in terms of why are we doing these different things and what are the benefits we're looking to achieve from our projects, but then also being able to see, if I go back to my previous dashboard here, take a look at this, but just how well are we performing in terms of achieving those objectives. So any questions, comments based upon what you've seen here? All right, and so then, I mean, just to kind of wrap up here. So in terms of what we've used Amplify for, I would say we often have seen it used in like, say, cost reduction programs or post-merger integration programs. The reason I think that's some of our key use cases there is really just because those are where it really is critical that we achieve the business outcome or the business goals. And so when we start looking at, say, if there's been a cost reduction program, to Chris's point, where you're targeting, say, $1 billion in cost reduction, what you'll often see is, that's been announced publicly that we're embarking on that. At least it's definitely got the CEO's attention. And so we can't fall short of that target. And so what you'll see is Amplify used in those cases where we absolutely know we have to hit those business goals. We can track that, offer course corrections, and begin to respond to any challenges before we encounter them. I think post-merger integration is a similar one if you're looking at M&A. I see we've got a couple of things on the chat there. But yeah, so it's we can help monitor the performance again against M&A work, making sure we hit those goals. But really, it's useful across a variety of different programs where the focus is on achieving those business goals. And so if you are interested in learning more, I encourage you to visit our website. So if you just go to amplifynow.com, actually to our main website here, you'll be able to learn more about our solution here. But with that, just would like to say thank you for your time and hand it back off here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we do have a couple of questions.
Oh, it's really just, I kicked everything out based on their line of balance.
So what was the model that, and this is a question from one of the members of the audience. So please feel free to jump in if I'm not stating the question correctly, but what was the model on which that demo was based on?
Oh, it's Hoshin Kanri. So HOSHINKANRI. It's based on, yeah. So it's based on like the Toyota production system.
Yeah,
also, Danaher.
Let's put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Something that I think would be beneficial, and again, perhaps not the most, I haven't had much exposure to everything that both you and Chris discussed, but basically, if I'm a manager and I know that I have to be very prudent and judicious with the budget, with the funds that I have at my disposal, why would I, or what should I select Amplify as opposed to just a basic Tableau license or a basic Power BI license? Can you please quickly just provide in a couple of minutes an overview of all of the advantages that your platform provides over, a standard enterprise level dashboard?
So, yeah, so it's really quite a few here. So the main thing is just the integration of project execution, project delivery with KPIs and benefits realization. So to Chris's earlier comments around like leading versus lagging indicators, if we're just sitting there and you're only looking at KPIs or you're only looking at benefits realization as a result of your program outcomes or as a result of your program, it's too late to respond. You notice that you're behind when you start not seeing the dollars that coming in, when you start not seeing the benefits. What Amplify allows you to do is much earlier begin to see those threats to realizing the benefits. So you can begin to see that, hey, this IT system that was supposed to automate all these processes is 6 months behind. That 6-month delay is going to mean that we're going to miss our benefits target by, say, $5 million this fiscal. And so that's kind of the primary benefit I'd say you get with the integration, but also just being able to include the entire enterprise in collecting those data points, managing that data, and keeping everyone in lockstep.
Sounds great. Any other questions?
Sorry, can I also add on to that answer? I find, and as project managers, we're pretty good at doing this, is that sometimes we boil an ocean. And I think sometimes we need to ratchet back. So wouldn't it be great if we could use Microsoft Project, now, in its online form, to do and organize all of these activities? Well, we know that that's, that's a big ask, right? And also, it doesn't actually focus on outcomes. It just focuses on activities. Okay, so then let's look at some larger systems like portfolio, program, and project management systems that allow you to organize all of these things. And I'm sure I don't have to name them for you to know what they are. But they also actually, they might focus maybe on just the portfolio decision side of things. Maybe they just focus on, again, more activities. But again, they're not focusing on managing the program to its outcomes. And how do you orchestrate across programs? And so, and also the other thing that I think people get attracted to is the idea of information feeds. Well, if it doesn't have this information feed, then what's the point? The point is that we can actually put in a system such as Amplify in very, very quickly, because it's web-based, cloud-based system that doesn't off the start rely on, having everything configured, ready to go. It can be, configured and used and have tangible benefits really quickly in its use in its life cycle. And you can grow and evolve it to meet more sophisticated needs. It can be used at the project level, program level, enterprise level. And so I think it can be attuned to where an organization is and its maturity around managing transformation programs from an outcomes perspective. You can get to results much more quickly without having to boil the ocean, in other words. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I think definitely there are a lot of features and a lot of value provided by your platform. I just want to make sure that you provide like a quick summary of naturally of all the different benefits, or what would someone have to gain from becoming a client of yours. So thank you. Can everyone see the tech webinars slide on your screen, all right? We are looking for speakers. If you have used a particular platform or software or app that has been really helpful for whatever purposes, for work purposes, please feel free to reach out to, and you are, of course, if you are competent with the software, if you are comfortable providing like a 45-minute overview of it, please feel free to reach out to BP, that's B as in Victor, P as in program, dash programs at PMINEO.org. We do have a couple of upcoming events coming up in November. Again, please visit PMINEO.org for a full events calendar. And the PDUs. Please let me know if anyone can't see the screen. That right there is the PDU claim code and all of the information that you will need to enter in the platform in order to get your PDUs. We will leave that on the screen for a couple minutes. And with that said, again, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Chris. This has been a great presentation. We appreciate you facilitating this event. I send you a couple of certificates of appreciation via email. Please let me know if you don't get them. And with that said, again, please follow us on social media. Stay in touch in order to be a part of all of the upcoming events that we have in the works. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you, everyone.